Solar power will never be practical, much less reliable. That comment came in during our live yesterday. I love these comments because it gives us an opportunity to really study the facts and see if there's any truth to them. So without further ado, guys, welcome to the DIY Off-Grid channel. I'm your host, Rancher Pete, and today let's see how much of an impact solar energy can make in the next few decades as society as a whole tries to reduce this reliance on fossil fuels. Will solar energy ever become practical and reliable enough to make up a substantial portion of our grid? Solar energy is hailed as the future of renewable power, clean, abundant, and increasingly affordable. But skeptics argue that it's too intermittent and dependent on weather to play a more dominant role in powering the grid. So, can solar overcome these challenges? And what would it take for solar to take upon this role? As always, let's get to the facts, see where the numbers are, and look at what innovations are shaping the future of solar energy. So first off, let's see where solar is today. If you caught our segment on coal power, we've already established that solar energy is expected to account for about 6% of the total electricity generation in the United States this year, up from 5% in 2023 and just 1% in 2016. According to the Energy Information Agency, solar made up 63% of all new generation capacity for the year. Why is solar growing so rapidly in the past few years? Photovoltaic solar power systems went down in price in a staggering amount in the last few years. In 2010, solar panels were over $2 per watt from the factory. In 2020, that dropped to just 30 cents per watt, and as of this year, it's a mere 7 cents per watt. The LCOE, or levelized cost of energy, of solar at a grid scale project have dropped from 27 cents per kilowatt hour in 2010 to 6 cents in 2020 to the lowest PPA, or power purchasing agreement, signed by a utility company in the US came out to just 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour for a project in New Mexico with the utility company El Paso Electric. Think about that for a moment. The utility company is paying the developer 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour for a solar project for the next 20 years. That's about half to a third of the cost of the average natural gas turbine generator in the United States in the past few years. We've already hit a point where solar is cheaper to produce a unit of electricity than the most cost-effective fossil fuel. Now, let's address some issues with the numbers I just quoted above. Solar is cheaper to produce a unit of electricity versus any other fossil fuel system. However, it can obviously only produce power when the sun is shining. Unlike fossil fuel and nuclear, we're at the mercy of the weather, cloud coverage, rain or snow for a solar system to be producing electricity. There are a couple of very interesting aspects of this because, for starters, the greatest demand for electricity is during the middle of the day for air conditioning, which, as we've pointed out in the past, it's the single biggest consumer of electricity for residences and commercial buildings. Demand peaks in the day, and as such, cost also peaks during the day. But due to how cheap solar is, solar does more to offset that peak demand. The value of electricity is highest midday, and that's where solar shines. With the exception of California, most states still have plenty of unfulfilled demand for solar to produce energy during the daytime. This will be the low-hanging fruit for the other states and the quickest and easiest way to make huge forays into fossil fuel consumption with solar energy. It's safe to say that we can scale easily from 6% today to about 30% before we hit our next obstacle. Now, what is that next obstacle, you say? Once power production from solar gets saturated during the day, without batteries for energy storage, supply starts exceeding demand, resulting in power stations having to curtail power production. This has already happened in California on occasion, where solar farms and wind farms would have to be idled because there's nowhere to send that electricity, which resulted in a change in policy requiring the deployment of batteries for energy storage. Utility scale energy storage is still a bit on the pricey side today, but with improvements in lithium battery yield and manufacturing technology and scale, prices are still on a downward trajectory, which by the time other states get to the point of solar saturation, energy storage battery costs should be economically viable and attractive to pursue. The NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, put out a report outlining the Sunshot Initiative by the DOE. The goal for 2030 is for utility-scale solar to achieve 3 cents per kilowatt-hour, with energy storage at $264 per kilowatt-hour for utility-scale 8 hours of storage. If we do achieve the Sunshot goals, the NREL anticipates 17.5% of all the electricity in the United States to come from solar by 2030 and 55.2% by 2050. They project solar power to have the plurality in electricity generation within a decade, which is quite incredible if we consider natural gas making up 42% of the grid power last year. But it's not too far-fetched if we dig into the numbers. It would be fiscally responsible to go that route rather than investing in deploying more natural gas power plants. When looking through the data, the two biggest factors that could shift these numbers would be the role of nuclear and wind energy. Now, what are my thoughts on these two? I'm always for nuclear energy, and I think with all the new demand for electricity from data centers, thanks to AI and cryptocurrency, nuclear power is vital to ensure a stable supply of power, as even fossil fuel plants aren't really that great in that regards. Nuclear power plants in the US have had an average capacity factor of 92 to 93% in the past decade. Fossil fuel plants barely hit 54% last year. If we want to power all these data centers, new nuclear plants is an absolute must, and it's kind of refreshing to see big tech companies making plays and investments in new nuclear power plants. The big question mark is, can they build these nuclear power plants at a reasonable cost? We'll save this question for another day, as it's laughable how expensive nuclear power plant construction costs have been recently in this country. Second is wind energy. Wind energy actually has an even lower carbon footprint than solar. In fact, it's the lowest of all energy production systems out there per kilowatt hour produced. They're getting better, more reliable, cheaper per watt, and cheaper per kilowatt hour as well. Wind's capacity factor is actually better than solar on average at around 33 to 35% versus 24% and falling for solar right now. Rollout has slowed quite a bit compared to solar because of solar's rapidly declining costs, but wind is still quite competitive, and in regions that don't get as much sunlight, it could be more practical. Most projections seem to imply wind energy has peaked in this country and deployments will plateau over time. I, for one, don't want to underestimate the potential of wind, especially with ever larger and larger offshore turbines that are being designed, with turbine concepts that reach upwards to 50 megawatts each. So, will solar be practical and reliable? I think solar is already financially practical. The panels and generation systems themselves have proven to be reliable as well. After we saturate daytime demand with solar, however, it will come down to battery systems to store that energy for use throughout the evening. That technology is also readily available and mature, just a little on the expensive side. I can actually compare the cost of battery energy storage technology with gas combustion turbine peaker plants on another session to explore the numbers there. And just as a heads up, you'd actually be surprised because the cost difference between batteries and natural gas peaker plants, it's actually much closer than you would think. Thanks for tuning in to the DIY Off-Grid channel. If you found today's episode insightful, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your community. If you're wondering how much you can save with solar and batteries, sign up for it at our website at allthingsoffgrid.com, or you can simply fill out that sign up form on my TikTok profile. We had some great calls with those of you who signed up the past couple of days here with some good ideas on discussion topics. If you have ideas on topics for us to explore as well, do feel free to leave a comment or message me. Until next time, guys, stay warm and stay curious.